This is my first VFX shot, and it's kind of ugly, so in this video, I'll be making it better. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video to see how it turns out. Before we do anything, we need the idea. The original shot has a gelatinous cube from Dungeons & Dragons. I wasn't a big fan of how static it looked, so this time around I'll be giving it a physics simulation. Another thing I didn't like in the original was the background, so this time I'll 3D model it to look like this sketch I made. Finally, I want better camera motion, so instead of tracking the scene, like I did previously, I'll keyframe the camera position. For my idea, the most important thing to get done first is the 3D environment and its textures, because it acts as a base for the camera motion and the physics simulation. Alright, so let's add mesh plane for the ground. If we scale that up, it's perfect. Alright, rotate that 90 degrees and we got our wall. If we duplicate that, our other wall's done. Same thing with the ceiling. Nice. So let's go into our shader tab to add a texture. What I want is a dark brick texture. What I'm doing right now is changing the way light bounces off our plane to make it look more three-dimensional and potentially rocky, which is the kind of look I'm going for. Now I'm mixing the shader I just made with darkness in a brick texture so that it looks more like a brick. So what I'm gonna have to do is add more feather on the mortar so that it looks more realistic rather than the kind of cartoony mortar it had previously, more like shadows in between the bricks. I think this looks great in the rendered view, really realistic in my opinion. Here's the snow tree that I used. Moving on to the next texture, I'm going to use the snow tree to give it a rocky look. It's going to be a very similar tree to the previous one, just minus the brick texture. All I've got to do is add this texture to the other faces in the hallway, and we're done texturing it for now. So I lost some footage. Right now I'm working on the texture for this little thing I made, this decoration. I want a noisy metallic texture that looks old and rusty. So we just gotta give it some metallic properties really fast. Yeah, after changing around the settings a bit, I got a base texture that I'm pretty happy with. Right now, I try to smooth it out, but it doesn't really work, so I just leave it alone. So to give the decoration the rusty texture I want it to have, I'm going to add a noise texture and plug that into one of the settings so that it has a bit of variation to it, breaking up the uniformity a bit. Right now I'm just messing with the settings, plugging in the noise texture to different attributes to get the result I want. I think this ends up looking really good, especially in the rendered view, so I just leave it at that for now. I'm adding a new cube to use as an archway in the hallway, so I'm just going to scale that up to the right size and put it in the right position so that I can use it in the future. Now I'm going to give the cube the metal texture so that it blends in with the decoration a bit better. What I'm doing right now is adding a cylinder. I'm going to subtract it from the geometry of the cube to make it an archway. I'm going to duplicate the little decoration to put on the other side of the arch. Once I get the cylinder in the correct position, I can use the Boolean tool to subtract its geometry from the original cube. Let me add a cube. This one's also going to be a Boolean for the archway, except it's going to make it look like it's made of metal bars. Once I scale it properly, I can duplicate it evenly across the archway, making sure to avoid the arch in it. So we can duplicate these and flip them around to complete the other half. And then after we're done that, we're going to do the same thing we did on the cylinder and just use the Boolean tool. That looks great. So now that we're done a segment of our hallway, if I want to make it longer, what I can do is I can use the array modifier in the modifiers tab to instantiate the mesh just over and over again, which would make it longer without actually adding more vertices. So I can do the same thing to all the other faces, and then we'd end up getting a longer hallway. Now that we have our hallway modeled and textured, it's time to move on to the next step, which is to model the gelatinous cube, and that should be pretty easy. I'm going to add a simple subdivision to give me more geometry to work with. I'm going to give this a glass shader by going into the shading tab and adding a glass BSDF with color set to green. I don't end up using the principled BSDF that I set up, and I don't mix it up with the glass BSDF either. Step 4, camera motion. So here I struggle to find an empty object. Essentially what I'm going to be doing with this is I'm going to take this, put it in the middle of the hallway. I'm going to track the camera to this empty so that I can have more precise control over the camera and give it the sharp turns that I want to. So what I'm doing right now is I'm keyframing the empty's movement through the hallway to give the camera a kind of look over the shoulder. What I want to achieve with the camera motion is a bit of storytelling. So the person holding this camera is going to be running towards the exit of this dungeon, and he's going to turn around and see the gelatinous cube. Next step, physics. I'm going to give the cube a soft body simulation, which makes it act kind of like Jello, but helps it interact with other physics simulations like wind, which I'm setting up right now. I created a collision domain so that there's a simple mesh for it to collide with. You can see that white kind of staple right there. Simulation is a lot of trial and error in 3D, so that's essentially what I'm doing right now. I just gotta mess around with a ton of settings until I'm happy with it. Overall, I'm really happy with the final render. It took a lot of time and effort, so if you could, I mean, it says subscribe. I guess that means that you should, do it. Anyway, thanks for watching this whole thing. Yeah, if you were just watching this wondering why it's, like, bad, it's because this is, my first video, so thanks.